We live surrounded by screens, yet increasingly disconnected from the tangible. We touch smooth surfaces, swipe our fingers across glass, never feeling the roughness of the real world. Direct experience, with its uncertainty and surprise, has been replaced by polished representations, optimized to please. It's not that the world has vanished, but that it's been replaced by its image, an image that demands no thought, only a glance. The real has been colonized by the visible. Byung-Chul Han, with his trademark melancholic precision, warned us. We are sliding into a society of transparency, where everything must be visible, but nothing is truly understood. What is not shown does not exist. What is not displayed has no value. Reality doesn't vanish all at once. It slowly fades, smothered by an avalanche of data, selfies, metrics, and projections. We live not so much to be, but to be seen. This new visual order does not produce knowledge. It generates noise, a flood of meaningless information that dulls thought and dissolves attention. The overstimulation doesn't enrich, it exhausts. The irony: we've never had more access to reality, yet never been farther from it. Because looking is not the same as understanding, and being connected is not the same as being present. Behind this crisis of the real lies a deep anxiety, the fear of emptiness. In a world that no longer offers grand narratives or shared certainties, the proliferation of images acts as a sedative. We cling to the digital as if holding on to driftwood during a shipwreck. But what happens when that driftwood no longer floats? When all we see is a projection of our fears, desires, and algorithms, what's left of the truth? At this point in the journey, dear reader, I'd like to offer a sincere invitation. If this reflection has made you think, feel, or even just question the world around you a bit more, consider supporting this project. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Not to feed digital vanity, but so that this kind of reflection, meant not to entertain but to awaken, can continue to exist. Now more than ever, thinking is an act of resistance. And called it what it is. We live in the hell of sameness, where differences are erased in the name of a false inclusivity and everything becomes interchangeable. This doesn't just flatten experience, it erases the possibility of authenticity. When everything is image and simulation, uniqueness, that unrepeatable spark that makes each moment and person singular, disappears. It's no longer about living, but about updating a profile. Reality, understood as an encounter with the other, with what we cannot control, has become unbearable for a culture obsessed with immediacy and control. We prefer prediction over mystery, calculation over contemplation. And in that shift, the real, with its risks, its ambiguity, its depth, becomes an inconvenient residue. We pixelate it, edit it, delete it. And so, without even noticing, we become citizens of a consensual illusion. The ancients knew that truth wasn't a clear mirror, but a difficult path. Socrates didn't teach ideas. He shattered false certainties. Jesus didn't offer easy answers. He spoke in parables that unsettled. Freud knew consciousness wasn't transparent. It was a battlefield of opposing drives. Today, by contrast, everything must be easy, instant, user-friendly. But at what cost? The psychology of the modern self is marked by hyperexposure. We constantly look at ourselves through the eyes of others. We are no longer owners of our own face, but of a curated version of it. This constant self-surveillance fractures the self, breaking it into fragments that must attract, persuade, perform. The question is no longer who am I, but how do I look? And what if that very reality of the self has ceased to exist? We look to the past with a certain nostalgia, not to idealize it, but because it still had silence, empty spaces where thought could take root. Today, everything is full of stimuli, of messages, of notifications. There's no room for stillness, for introspection. We live in a constant state of alert, but with no direction. And when the noise never stops, the soul loses its compass. Han put it bluntly, excessive positivity makes us sick. Because in that world, everything must be optimized, corrected, perfected. There's no room for weakness, doubt, or pain. But reality includes all of that. It is, at its core, imperfect, ambiguous, alive. To deny it is to deny our humanity. That's why the disappearance of reality isn't just a technological phenomenon, it is a spiritual one. History is full of moments when reality was contested. From medieval heresies to scientific revolutions, there were always forces trying to impose a single story. But at least back then, there was disagreement, struggle, conflict. Today, what disappears is the very notion of disagreement, replaced by the illusion of algorithmic consensus. Everyone thinks the same, because no one thinks too much. This sameness of thought doesn't come from totalitarianism. It comes from entertainment. Distraction is more effective than censorship. Social media, now laboratories of desire, shape our emotions with surgical precision. What we think we're choosing was already chosen for us. And so freedom becomes a simulation, another fragment of reality slipping away. Yet not all is lost. There are gestures that resist. A book read in silence, a conversation without screens, a walk with no map or clock, small acts that return us to direct experience. In the simple, something real still hides. Not spectacular, not grand, but real. And maybe it's there where we must seek refuge, like one who finds a spring in the middle of the desert. Thinking, Arendt once said, is a dialogue with oneself. But how can that happen when every inner voice is drowned by external noise? Hyperconnectivity has broken our bond with interiority. The self has been exiled from itself. And without that intimacy, that inner space, the world becomes incomprehensible. Because only the one who knows themselves can truly see. The culture of the image has reversed the logic. We no longer use technology to see the world. We use the world to feed technology. Every experience must be documented, turned into content. But in doing so, the experience itself vanishes. Like tourists in our own lives, we move through them without inhabiting them, record them without living them. There is no nostalgia here, only warning. The problem isn't technology, but its absolutization. The mistake isn't using screens, but living inside them. Reality hasn't disappeared, but it has become fragile, harder to reach. We must make an effort to get to it, like pushing through a thick forest in search of light. Maybe the question is not whether reality still exists, but whether we still want to find it. Because the search involves pain. It involves uncertainty. Not everyone is willing, but some are. Those who pause, who question, who let themselves be unsettled. And in that act, there is something deeply courageous, to look directly, even when there are no filters. That courage, to see without decoration, to think without crutches, is what we must reclaim. Not to go back, but to build a denser, more human present. One where truth is not a data point, but a process, where reality is not a spectacle, but an encounter. A place where perhaps we might finally recognize ourselves.